overcoming obstacles to change. So please could you post any questions in the chat box for the question and answer session afterwards. And we're now going to mute everyone, or can you mute yourself? And it's over to you, Jane.
Thank you very much, Jackie, and hello to anyone I haven't said hello to yet. So I think my first thing in putting this together was a big decision for myself. This is a huge topic on decision making, so I have had to leave a lot out, and I've picked kind of 10 top areas that I think will be useful for people to go away and try. But please do get in touch with me if you've got questions about any other aspect of decision making. So the 10 top tips as well are going to be available afterwards. So I think Dave's going to send that out. So don't worry about making notes now. So I thought I'd start with a quote, and this one's from Viktor E. Frankl, which says, "Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and our freedom." So it's that bit that I'm exploring today, between something happening and you making a decision. And all I'm really trying to do in this very short talk is to raise your awareness as to what your options are, because for reasons I'll explain, we tend to fall into kind of patterns of decision making. So as Jackie said, I support people who are making big life changes. And part of that, obviously, is to decide what to move forward to, what to leave behind, who to involve. And that's the bit where I find people really struggle. We get lost in either the analysis or just the number of options and so on. So decision making tends to be thought of as quite hard. So I'm going to ask you to make a decision now, and just ask, maybe you could stick this in the chat, how many decisions do you think we make every day, roughly?
20.
1,000, 20, 2,000, thousands, 55, 70, some very specific numbers there. Well, apparently, and you might be surprised, some of you, by this, by wiring people up to scanners and MRIs and electrodes on the head and so on, they've discovered apparently it's 35,000 decisions every day. Now, those, of course, include things that I would call tactical decisions, small minor decisions, you know, which foot will I step off the pavement with, how long will I wait to cross the road, that sort of thing. But there's also the higher level strategic decisions, so the big ones like, when will I retire, or how will I raise the topic with my spouse. So 35,000 is a lot of decisions, and they tend to be exhausting because decision making involves the frontal cortex of the brain and specific areas within that. Now, the brain is the organ that uses more energy than any other in the body, and it's this frontal cortex uses the most energy in the brain. And our brains have evolved to try and save energy. So we have lots of systems in place to try and systematize our decisions, which can be very effective, but it can also lead to some problems. So that's the first issue with decisions, is it causes us to get tired. And as soon as we get tired, we start making bad decisions. So there's this sort of vicious circle that goes on. And I will come back to this at the end of the talk, because there are some tips as to how you can reduce the energy you're using, or at least replenish that. But in order to avoid that, as I've said, the brain uses shortcuts. So the first thing I think is, my first tip anyway, is for you to be aware of what kind of decisions cause you the most problem. Is it those big strategic ones, and how long do you spend on them, and what sort of decisions around that do you find exhausting? So just raise your awareness about decisions you're facing every day and which ones are taking you most time and therefore most energy. The other thing you can do is to try and routinize it, if you like. I can't think of a good, or systematize your decision making. So famously, Barack Obama only ever wore 2 colors of suit I can't even remember now, dark blue and grey, I think they were. So he didn't have to make decisions about what to wear. So he would just make things as simple as possible. And as he said at the time, he'd had enough other decisions to be making during a day that he wouldn't bother with the trivial ones. So some people plan their menus for a week ahead, or as I say, their wardrobe, or anything else you can do. Once you've noticed that if you spend hours every day trying to decide what to wear, then try and find a system to cope with that. The other thing that we find difficult is a more modern phenomenon, which is the amount of choice we have. So in the 1950s, for example, there might only have been 2 brands of shampoo to buy when you went in the shop, and people found that quite an easy decision. Nowadays, I don't know, I didn't count in my supermarket last time I went, but there must be hundreds of brands of shampoo to choose from. And although that feels like it's made life better, people find it harder. And the reason for that is that in our decision making, we're not just looking at what we are choosing, but we're looking at what we're saying no to. And our brains don't like that. So if out of 2 shampoos you choose one, you're only saying no to one other. If you're choosing one shampoo out of 50, you're choosing one, but you're saying no to 49 other shampoos. And we get into that, oh, but that one might be better, and I've just seen an ad for this one, and that might be exactly what my hair needs. And we're trying to avoid that loss all the time. So just the number of options available to us nowadays can make life a lot harder, or certainly make the decision aspect of it harder. So my tips for that is narrow down your choices. Be really clear on your criteria, for example. So if you're only going to look at organic shampoos, then that limits the number that you're looking at. Or if you're going to look at those that cost less than £5 for a bottle of it. So be really aware of what you're buying on. Is it cost? Is it quality? Is it, I don't know, how quickly you can wash your hair every morning, or how frequently you can do it. So that would be one thing, is to apply some criteria and narrow down your choice before you then look at the decision. The other thing is to try and overcome the loss aversion by looking at what you're getting rather than what you're not getting. So if you're really clear on what you want to achieve, that can help reassure you that you are choosing the right thing. So I gave this talk probably about a year ago at another network. Somebody said to me afterwards, that's really, really helped me. She was looking to move flat, or was having to, and all she could think about were the features of the flat that she was losing. She said as soon as she stopped thinking about that and looking at what she could get by moving flat and what new facilities she could have, then it became a much easier choice for her. So try and find the positives rather than letting your brain dwell on the negatives. So these shortcuts that we take are part of a whole thing around fast and slow thinking. Some of you may have read Daniel Kahneman's book on that. So we tend to think of fast decisions as being gut-based. So people will just say, well, my gut told me, go for option X. Head decisions are the slower ones, where we gather data and look at analysis and maybe ask other people for their recommendations and so on. Much more logical and rational, as opposed to the emotional gut, if you like. But again, latest research is showing that actually all our decisions are gut-based, and that we rationalize them after the event using our heads. So we can explain to our friends why we chose to go to that place on holiday, whereas actually maybe it was just a picture in the brochure kind of grabbed our attention. So just be aware of that as well, and that your first response to something, the gut fast thinking, may be exactly what you want, but it may be that you're falling into the trap of these shortcuts. So using your head as well to then say, well, actually, have I considered all the options and so on, may be a good mix. And one thing that I do with coaching clients is to try and get that alignment. So what tends to happen in decisions is you hear people saying, oh, on the one hand, I really want to do X, but then on the other hand, I want Y. And we end up kind of dithering between the two. And that's usually because they've come from different bits of us, if you like. So there are things like breathing techniques, which astonishingly does things like improve the quality of the air in your body, makes us stop, disconnect from the day-to-day things, and we can start aligning and literally talking to our gut and our heart and our head and making sure that they're all aligned on the decision that we're making. So we stop this sort of seesawing, if you like. Gut is the bit really that uses these shortcuts, so it kind of goes straight to a decision. And I'm not going to go into all of them. They're known as cognitive biases. I've already talked about loss aversion, but some others that you might want to just be aware of. One is anchoring. In other words, if I had, for example, said to you earlier, how many decisions do we make a day? Is it more or less than 30,000? You would all have gone for numbers around about 30,000 probably. Whereas by leaving it open, we had some as low as, I think 55 was the lowest, and then we had 50,000 thousands. So we tend to go for something that we already have heard about, maybe news, maybe advertising, maybe what our friends have said. So we're not completely free in our decisions. We tend to anchor on something we already know about. So be aware of that. Where is my data coming from? Have I made it up? Or is it coming from really good sources? The other thing we tend to do is be aware of our outcomes. So we judge decisions based on the outcome. So I don't know how many of you have had this. You know, we beat ourselves up for a decision we took 2-3 years ago, judging it on the outcome today. Whereas 3 years ago, when we were making the decision, we didn't know the outcome. We were going on the data we had at the time. So one thing to do there is be really clear on the outcome you want. So there's examples I've read about deciding where to put a new power plant, for example. You know, is what we want the most support from the public, or is it the cheapest form of generating power? That those two decisions would give us two different results as to where to place the power plant, for example. And we might not know for years where the profit is in that. So be clear on the outcome you want, and then, as I've mentioned earlier about the loss aversion, the criteria that you're going to apply. If you are able to, of course, it's possible to reassess decisions later on, but we need to be clear about why we made the decision we made at the time, and they even need to document that. So, as I've said, there are lots of other cognitive biases in play, and you may want to read up on them. And as in all coaching, really, this is about raising your awareness of it and then being able to work with them or counteract them in some way. Some practical tools, again, these will be in the handout you get. Be very clear on the process you're going to use to make a decision. Are you going to go with your gut, for example? Or if it's a more head-based decision, how will you do that? So who has to be involved? Who has the most say in it? Where will you get your data from? How long will you spend on the research? What will be your judgment of a good decision at the end of it? So if you're clear on that before you even start looking at the data, then it just becomes a question of following the process, if you like. Several of you will use logical approaches already, so lists of pros and cons. Again, much easier if you know the criteria. If you're going on cost, we just need to list the costs of things. If it's cost and quality, then you need to put in some more checkboxes to be making the decision. There's something I used a lot in my project management life, which was something called a decision tree. I won't stop and draw one now, but it starts with a decision and then the different options branching off from that. So I could decide to do A or B or C or D, and then we can map, if I do A, what might be the other outcomes that result. Same for B, C, D. It's a very good technique, by the way, just for capturing the discussion that might be happening in a team or in a family. Just to draw out the options rather than let people spin it all around. Well, if I do this and then if that and then if that, draw it. And then if we look at the different outcomes, it's much easier then to assess, you know, if I do option A and then option C, then I'll get what I want at the end of it. So that was a quick run through a lot of things around decisions. Just some tips here to help you recover from decision fatigue. One is get good sleep. Another is to get good nutrition. So all of those feed all our systems and allow them to operate at their peak efficiency. But one that was astonishing to me, and I experienced it firsthand, and you can do this much more easily than leaving a meeting and going having a nap, for example, is to receive or even just give positive feedback, because that releases a whole load of hormones that help replenish the decision battery, if you like, and up the energy there. So even if you can't get good feedback yourself, find some to give other people and you will get a similar effect, and it can be instantaneous. So that's a nice easy one that I try and use very frequently. And I'll just finish with another quote, which is from Theodore Roosevelt, and he says that in any moment of decision, the best thing to do is the right thing. The next best thing to do is the wrong thing, and the worst thing to do is nothing. So do make decisions. As I say, try and make them flexible so you can revisit them later. But otherwise, if you allow it to fester, it's just going to use up all that precious energy and you're not going to get anywhere. So I hope that's been helpful. As I say, I think Dave's going to send out my 10 top tips in PDF format later, but I'm happy to take any questions now.
Well, thank you very much, Jane. That was a fantastic talk. I learned such a lot. So we're now over to questions and answers. So I'll hand over to Rob.
Brilliant, thank you. I'm not sure if anyone has any questions. No questions in the chat. Does anyone have any questions they'd like to ask Jane? I'm sure I've got a couple if no one else does.
I've got one if I can jump in.
Of course, yeah.
One of the biggest challenge I find is almost kind of completing the decision-making process. You know, you kind of start the process, particularly in the bigger decisions, and trying to get to the end of it before being distracted and pulled off to do something else, and then having to go back and revisit it and almost finding a different path through the same thing and ending up in two different places. Are there any things you can try and suggest to try and help that, other than stay focused and finish the job in the first place?
Well, I suspect you're leaving it because of the fatigue that sets in. So you may want to think about visiting it in pieces.
Right.
So,
okay.
you know, today I will gather some data, I'll do the research, and then I will leave it. And tomorrow I'll come back and analyze that data.
Also decision-making project, you know, sort of taking
it
stages.
Indeed,
Yeah.
yes. Because that's what your body and brain are kind of doing to you anyway, isn't
Yeah.
it? When you get fed up and leave it. But maybe just plan that, or at least accept that that works for you as a decision-making process.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
Brilliant. Well, thank you. A few more questions coming through. So, David, would you like to give your question?
Thank you. Thanks, Jane. Slightly similar, I think, to the previous question, but also slightly different. When have you got any thoughts about when you get sort of stuck in a decision-making trap and you feel like you're constantly either circling around or, you know, penduluming backwards and forwards, and you can't really see the obvious way forward?
I think, again, that tends to be sometimes that you're using different criteria. So you might think, right, well, I'll go for that because I can buy that product locally and it's reasonably cheap. But then something else comes in that says, oh yeah, but actually if I went 50 miles, I could buy a better, whatever it is. So it might be that you need to get clearer on the criteria that you're using. It might be, as I say, this sort of gut head thing that you're making the decision on one basis and then something else comes in and starts influencing you. So if I was coaching you, I would actually be saying, you know, what are the voices saying? One's going, oh, just go for it. And the other one's going, no, stop and think. And there might be a way of actually keeping both bits happy in that decision process. Right. I'm sorry, I can't, you didn't give a specific example, so I hope that's...
No, it was... there was no specific example. Okay. It was more just there are too many to be specific.
Okay.
Brilliant, thank you. And Jackie, do you have a question as well?
Hi, yes. Jane, I really liked your idea of the tips you gave there on recovering from decision fatigue. And I wondered what your thoughts were around coaching people to provide their own positive feedback, as well as giving and receiving.
Yes, I think that's a good one. Some people, of course, find that quite difficult because they don't believe themselves. So, you know, you can come out with the, yeah, great, you've made a decision. But just noticing things, I think. So I try and do something at the end of the day of thinking of 3 things that went really well and celebrating those. So maybe encouraging people to think about the decisions they've made during the day and just noticing, yeah, I did decide about that. And yeah, I did set off to do something and then I changed my mind and that was a better thing to do. So just noticing where they've made decisions, noticing where they made a decision that feels right and why it feels right. I would try and avoid the outcome though, because as I've said, it may be we made a perfectly valid decision and 3 days later events show us it wasn't such a great one. But yeah, I think it's a hard one for people giving feedback to themselves. But the other one might be just to ask their partner to give them some feedback until they can begin to believe it for themselves.
Thank you.
Perfect, brilliant. And a question from the chat from Michelle, I think. But the book you mentioned, what was it? What was it called? Was it called Fast Thinking? Is that right?
Yeah, no, Francois answered it. I think it's called Thinking Fast and Slow. Yes, yes. So he talks about a lot more than I've had time to do today about those cognitive biases and how insidious they are because we don't even realise we're doing them.
No, brilliant. Any more questions for any more? I mean, on the positive note, I think we should all be pretty impressed with ourselves. If we're making 35,000 decisions every day, I think that's just getting through the day is pretty good. I think we'll give ourselves a pat on the back for that. That's 35 decisions, 35,000 decisions. So brilliant.
Which is great. So
I'm going to name the plant Dave.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I was going to say Jacob because it's Jacob's Crackers and it's a cheese plant.
Oh, okay, that's cool. So
yes, and I've been trying to name Michelle's plant.
Okay.
Who's won, Michelle? What?
Me, Jacob. my rules.
Nice one, Michelle.
Great one. Okay then, well, thanks very much everybody, and thank you very much Jane for your talk. That concludes the meeting. Feedback, as Jane has pointed out, is very important to us, so do engage with us on social media, Twitter, Instagram and LinkedIn, and also subscribe to our YouTube channel. And so I'd like to tell you about our forthcoming meeting. So next month on Wednesday, November the 10th, 11 o'clock in the morning, we have Dominic Barker from the Hats Off Partnership. He'll be giving a webinar on how to develop an effective sales strategy. Dominic, would you like to give us an overview of that?
Yes, thank you very much. And thank you for the invite for being in the hot seat next month. Yes, the focus is going to be on creating an effective commercial strategy for your business, whether you are selling products, services, or even just selling your time, whether you're selling B2C or B2B. Some of the areas I'm going to look at are the basics you might want to put in place in order to build a robust pipeline and at the end of the day, increase your sales. Simple as that. I'll look at clarifying your product offering, creating target client groups, prospecting, creating a pipeline, marketing, and at the end of the day, pitching your service. I'll talk you through the processes you need to adopt. I'll provide you with some hints and tips. And at the end, as long as I get around to doing it, I will provide you a very nice business development template that will fit any business. That sounds confident, didn't it?
Very good.
That sounds really great. And another date for your diary is Wednesday, the 8th of December at 6 o'clock in the evening. And we're having an online wine tasting hosted by Tim Collis from Laithwaite to celebrate Christmas and 1 year of WeAreBiz. And Tim has joined us here today. So Tim, would you like to say a few words about it?
Yeah, certainly. Well, morning all. Yeah, this has come about from the best sort of introduction. Jackie joined one of these virtual tastings a while ago for another networking group, and yeah, it went well. And so she's asked me if we can do something for you guys, and we'd love to do it. Now, how this is going to work is that we're going to send out little cans and bottles, so you're all going to get a great choice. There's 5 different wines. I'll just gently meander through that with some great stories. Hopefully you might not have tasted some of these wines before, so you might learn a few bits and pieces. It's very relaxed, and yeah, please join in. And then as we're close to Christmas, if you want to buy some wines, and I hope you do, because I've got a pretty huge target, we'll give you a special price on those as well. So yeah, book your tickets. It'll be nice and relaxed, and we'll have a glass of wine and a laugh together. Back to you, Jackie.
Thanks very much, Tim. Well, both of those meetings sound really great and exciting. And to book for them, just visit our website, which is www.wearebiz.co.uk. And we look forward to seeing you at these next meetings. So that rounds it up for today. So I'd like to say goodbye from me and goodbye from Rob.
Yeah, bye guys. Thank you all for attending. Look forward to seeing you all next month.
And from Dave.
Yes, great to see you all, and please join us in December, because it's been a slightly different format than what you've experienced today.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone, and thank you again, Jane, for your great talk. Thanks a lot, everyone.
Thank you.